Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Nadia Ali. I'm the director of the Center for Middle East Studies here at Brown. And I'm grateful to be able to welcome you today, today's event, conversation on the Syrian Gulag. This is a book event, and we are very grateful that we have the two co-authors joining us. We have Ugur Umit Ungor joining us live in person, and Bakr is joining us online. This event was conceived and organized and will be moderated by Kate Elizabeth Creasy. I'm going to introduce Kate to you and then the speakers, and then I'll say a few words. Just before I start, I want to say I realize these are really very challenging times for many of us. There's lots of pain, and our thoughts are with Israel-Palestine. But I think one reason I was so grateful to Kate to bring the co-authors of the Syrian Gulag to Brown is because unfortunately we have a very short attention span. And unfortunately Syria has kind of dropped off people's attention, whether it's in the media, but even within academia. I mean, we had maybe one event on Syria the last couple of years, and that's it doesn't mean that the violence, the suffering, the displacement, the conflict, the incarceration, the torture has stopped in Syria. And so I'm grateful that we'll be able to give some recognition to that today and sort of work against this tendency to have, just look at the moment what's happening. So let me introduce to you Kate Creasy. Kate is a PhD candidate in the Department of History at Brown. She is an intellectual and cultural historian of the modern Middle East who specializes in contemporary Turkey. And her dissertation project, and I have to say one of the things that is really amazing about Kate is that she is writing all the time. Whether she's in Turkey or in Providence, she has a very rigorous writing schedule. And her dissertation project is provisionally entitled The Unspeakable Years, Military Rule, Neoliberalism, and Left Resistance in Cold War Turkey. I'm going to keep it short, but just to say that her writings have already been published in the Review of Middle East Studies, International Labor and Working Class History, and Bülent Journal. Now, in terms of the co-authors, let me first introduce to you Bakr. Jaba is joining us online. You'll see him in a moment. Jaba is a novelist, documentary filmmaker, human rights activist, researcher, and former detainee. He is a researcher currently at the Center for Media and Cultural Freedom. He has published several novels in Arabic, including 601, The Divine Trials, and Bab al-Faradis, The Lost Message of Ghaylan al-Dimashq in 2020. And he's a co-writer of the collective novel 3 Generations Under the President's Bridge. So welcome to Jaba. Ahlan wa sahlan. And live with us today is Ugur Umit Ungor. Ugur is professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at the University of Amsterdam and the NIOD Institute of War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies. His main area of interest is a history and sociology of mass violence, with a particular focus on the modern and contemporary Middle East. And Ugur has published widely. I'm just going to mention a few books: The Making of Modern Turkey, Nation and State in Eastern Anatolia from 1913 to 1950, which was published by Oxford University Press in 2011. And I know that you have a forthcoming book, Assad's Militias and Mass Violence in Syria, which will be published by Cambridge University Press, amongst other publications. So I'd like to welcome all of you. But before we start the event, I just wanted to say a few words. So I'd like to inform you that the discussion, the conversation will revolve around very difficult topics. I mean, we'll talk about state repression, the Syrian civil war, and related topics, and incarceration, torture, including sexual violence, will come up. So this is just to warn everyone. And I'm now going to hand over to Kate, who will tell you about the format of the event and then start moderating. So please help me in welcoming our guests. And
Thank you, Nadia. Before we start, I'd like to express my own appreciation to Barbara Oberkutter, Emily Rubelman, and Nadia Al-Ali, who we just heard from, of the Center for Middle East Studies for their work to organize today's event. I would also like to thank Bashar Doumani for his support in making today's event possible. Before I hand it over to Jabr and Uğur, I would like to note the format of today's event. Jabr and Uğur will present the book to us in a short 20-minute talk, about 10 minutes from each of them. And then we'll follow this with a 15-minute discussion among me and the authors, some questions I've prepared for them, and then we'll open the floor to questions and comments from the audience for the final half hour of our time together. Our event will conclude promptly at 1:15. Uğur, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Brown.
Thank you for the kind invitation. Great to see so many people interested in this, difficult and wretched topic. My name is Uğur Üngör. I work at the University of Amsterdam. I specialize mostly in political mass violence in the Middle East, in a broader, of course, theoretical and global context. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about 10 minutes of the arguments of the book. I have a few slides, and then Jabr will take over for the following 10 minutes, and then after that we will have a discussion. So let me just look at my slides here. And what I'd like to do is basically walk you through the book fairly simply, so you know what the arguments are and what we did. Maybe I should start off very briefly, and we can get into that in the discussion as well, that the book is a fundamentally collaborative project. I met Jabr when he was presenting his other book on Hospital 601, which is one of the major killing sites in Damascus. He was presenting it, and I walked up to him, and we started talking. And in our conversation, I asked him, why is it that we don't have a single overview book, like a synopsis, or even a long essay, actually, on how the entire system of detention functions in Syria? And he says, we don't have it. And then we said, why don't we make it, the book like that? So it took a long time. There was the pandemic in between, of course. But in essence, we combined our strengths. And it worked really hand in glove. And we'll talk maybe more about that in the collaboration. Now, the book is basically, there are four major dimensions to the prison system in Syria. And this is also one of our major arguments. Namely, we're not dealing here with a series of prisons or a society in which like any society, there's crime, criminals are arrested, they're put in prison, and the point is to have them reintegrate into society through parole and through reintegration. That's not what we're dealing with here. We're dealing here with a prison system, which is an intricate, connected, interlocking, sometimes also competing system of detention and torture that consists of at least four dimensions. First of all, the intelligence branches, the Syrian intelligence agencies, and there are four of those as well. They each of them have a detention system by themselves, in and of itself. Secondly, there are the three major military prisons that are Mezzeh, Palmyra, and Saydnaya, that you might have heard in some human rights documentation. Third, we have the civil prisons. Those are, let's say, the quote-unquote normal prisons. Let's say if you drunk drive, you kill someone, or there's a crime of passion, and there's an ordinary non-political criminals are generally put there, and the objective is to reintegrate them actually into society. And finally, we have the secret prisons, which has a long history in Syria, but especially since 2011, The secret prisons have proliferated because any militia, for example, could arrest alleged or real opposition demonstrators, for example, to the Assad regime, and imprison them indefinitely, or hand them over to the intelligence agencies. I also would like to mention that the cover painting is by Fadia Afashi, who is a Syrian artist who lives in Los Angeles. I was a visiting professor in Los Angeles at UCLA in 2019. And I met her husband, and he invited me to his house, and then I walked into the living room, and the painting is about as large, this painting is about as large as that door over there, and that was front and center in their living room. So when I walked in, I said, "This is the cover of the book. Can I please use this?" And she said yes, and we're very grateful to her for that. Now, let me start first with the main questions, and I apologize for the graphic. There's no happy story in any of this. Three major questions we asked ourselves. I think two of them we were able to answer to some extent. The third one we're not exactly sure about, or requires more research. First of all, how did and does the Assad regime build its power through its prison system? Second, how do the perpetrators function in this system? And third, how does the specter of the prison system affect Syrian society more broadly? Also those sections and people who've never been imprisoned, or family members, or offspring, intergenerational, etc. Now, the first two I think we've managed to answer. The third one requires much more in-depth sociological research into how directly or indirectly the society was affected by this mass imprisonment and torture system. Any of my slides or any of my presentations on Syria always begins with this slide, namely the vast coercive apparatus, the apparatus of violence that the Assad regime holds. And that's, of course, I color-coded them here. The army and the police, that's fairly normal, monopoly of violence, Max Weber. Second, the intelligence agencies, they're in green, and there are four of them in order of power: military intelligence, Air Force intelligence, political security, and state security, and the kind of Arabic term for that, as you know, is mukhabarat. Third, the special forces. These are elite troops, armed to the teeth, highly loyal, Praetorian Guard. One of them, the 4th Armored Brigade, is run by the kid brother of the President Assad, namely Maher al-Assad, this guy. And then finally, the book that I'm writing now is on the Shabiha phenomenon, which are kind of irregular militias that were armed and created in the beginning of the uprising to repress the demonstrations and to make sure that there's nobody would get it in their minds to organize protests, for example. Now, and that's a separate vector of violence that maybe when that book is out, we can come back to talk about that. Now, just the dimensions, just to give you a sense of these 4 dimensions. So in red, we have kind of provincial capitals, and in blue, we have a branch. And a branch, or in Arabic, fara, is an ugly concrete building in the middle of the city. Nobody comes close to it. There's no photos of it. And some people don't even look at it when they walk by. And generally 3 or 4 stories above ground, and then at least 3 or 4 underground. That's where the dungeons are, let's say. And above ground is the administration, is where the staff works. So this in itself, for example, the military intelligence, this would have been enough actually to surveil internally and also externally. But then we have the Air Force intelligence, which in itself is a brutal organization. There was a Syrian researcher who calculated that the Air Force intelligence in itself has killed more civilians than the Islamic State in its entire existence. Third, the political security, and this is, of course, division of labor. They're interested in different things. They surveil different sectors of society. They, in themselves, the political security, have their own kind of network and the tentacles around. And then finally, we have the state security, which is the oldest civil secret service. The branch 251, over here, one of the 4 branches in Damascus, the head of the branch, he fled to Germany, and he was recognized there by Syrian refugees, and the Germans put him on trial, and they gave him a life sentence, I think a year and a half ago. Anwar Raslan is his name. Now, this focus always on Assad, right, in his crisp Italian suit. For us, with Jabir, we talked about it many times, it distracts really from what we think is a fundamental issue in Syria, which is the intelligence agency's grasp over this society. And one of the major symbols of that is this man, of which there are very few photos also. His name is Ali Memlouk, and he is one of the security and intelligence dons in Syria, and possibly one of the most powerful men in the Middle East, for various reasons that we get into. Now, one of our arguments in the book is the prison system in Syria is different, differs from others, including in Iran or Turkey, for example. Initial comparative comments that we have, because it is an intricate system that is interlocking, in which the intelligence agencies function like a vacuum cleaner. They enter into society, they extract individuals, they torture their bodies, and then either they send them to the civil prisons, they can be released, or they send them to the three major camps, really. And there people stay, they languish, and very often they die because of maltreatment, sustained torture, and kind of general misery. So that intricate system is actually what's really for the first time that we uncovered the logic of it, by following biographies of people who were in prison, and to try to build a kind of collective biography of these survivors, and then painting the picture of perpetration from the inside out. Yeah, that's one argument. And the second argument is, why is all of this happening? There are obviously lots of theories, carceral theories on why prisons exist and why torture happens. We believe in Syria, it's one of the main arguments, one of the main reasons is to depoliticize Syrians, to make real kind of tangible opposition impossible. And that is because there is a box of permissible politics in Syria. That is, of course, the Ba'ath Party, and then a number of what they call in Arabic ahzab shekliya, which means bogus parties. They're not really exercising opposition against the regime, but they exist, and the regime wants them to exist, including a communist party, by the way, front party. But all of this is acceptable. There's even a parliament. But then the moment that Syrians step into that box of impermissible politics, and that can be the Ikhwan, so the Muslim Brotherhood, or that can be the communists, or that can be liberals, kind of libertarians, or those hundreds of thousands of people who dare to step into the streets and to yell slogans. That's in itself a political act. And all of that impermissible box has to be depoliticized. And you do that by, from the logic of the regime, by incarcerating them, by torturing them, by making them disappear. So the violence is actually a fundamental political function. These are the two arguments, actually, of the book. Yeah. I'll hand over to Jaber now.
Thank you. First of all, I excuse my English. I'll try to do my best. Then I will start from where Uğur stopped. I start with the same image with Mr. Maher al-Assad, but I go to with the father, Hawad al-Assad, and the Bashar al-Assad. And we have in our research to build our Syrian Gulag, I mean the book, not the Syrian Gulag as a prison, a different question, the main question, which meaning the prison for the Syrian people. I try to, actually I prefer to use the term in Arabic because the term in Arabic is meaning very well what's meaning the prison, because the prison in English or in Latin language all the time meaning the place where we keep the people that maybe they did some criminal issue. But in Syria, the prison all the time we use it the prison as a main issue against the Syrian society, not just against the opposite people, be it the opposite and their community and their family, their friends, their anyone that can be related to these opposite people. So in this case, I will use the sijn. It's the translated to the prison in Arabic. It's the name sijn, but the sijn that's meaning prison plus suffering all the time. So the first question of us when we start our research about that to build the Syrian Gulag, how many prisons we have in Syria? Because all the time anyone ask about Syria, all the time they try to calculate the prisoner, how the victims and the prisons and where these prisons based in Syria, in Damascus, in Aleppo, and where exactly in desert and Tadmor. And when this prison established or closed it, if they closed it already, and who managed this Gulag, who managed this archipelago, this missing word from the title, the Syrian Gulag, it's meaning the archipelago of the Syrian Gulag, because we have a real very strong network from the prison in the huge, in a huge network in the whole Syrian territory in different governments in Syria. Even when you speak in the headquarters of this intelligence service or the prison still in Damascus, but also we have Tadmor or Palmyra prison. It's one of the worst 10 prison around the world, and we have Saydnaya, now it's at the countryside of Damascus, and we have it from a long time, Al-Mazzi in the mountain nearby Damascus. So with this question, we start to have our, we're looking for our resource where we can find the information about the prison in Syria. We speak about we don't speak about Netherlands, we don't speak about Germany, we don't speak about US, we speak about Syria. It's a closed country, it's a closed government, it's a closed regime. You couldn't get any information from inside. So we need to examine, to build the prison from the victim. So we're looking for the victim. We're looking for the people who survived from the Syrian prison, we did a lot of interviews with the victims, the people they killed the Syrian regime after the revolution, and we get a lot of information, and we put it like a database, and we try to comparing the information. For example, someone told us about the dairy life inside Saydnaya before the 2011. And he said the life there, it was really good, it was something, blah, 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 etc. We comparing with someone, he passed the time in the same play, at the same place, and we try to find and figure out which kind of information is true or close to be true, or which information close to be something insane. For example, we have stories from Tadmor that we decide to keep it out, the Gulag, about the chemical experiment against the Syrian prisoner in Tadmor in the middle of 80s last century. So we have this kind of method. We get this information from interview first, then we have the human rights report, we have some document that we have it, that skipped Syria after the revolution through the SIJA and other organizations around the world. This kind of information, we get it, and we try to rebuild the Syrian Gulag in our mind, and try to follow the life inside the prison, and how the people inside the prison, they spend their time. They try to find their meaning, if I can say that. And the meaning inside the prison is something really, really so important issue to find it, because without meaning, you have to pass away inside the prison. I'm sorry to say that, because I have a lot of friends, they pass away inside the prison during the last 10 years, maybe before. I have one or two before the revolution. So all the time, these people, they passed away inside the prison. They don't have this aim to follow it, the meaning of the life. And when we speak about the life, in the Syrian Gulag, we don't have any basic life. We don't have any normal thing that we speak about it. We speak about the prison without anything, just the flow and some little food, just really a little food, and the people sleeping in this way, like this picture. Maybe worse, because this picture is very, very, very clean and very normal one. Before the revolution, we sleep in Saydnaya and Palestinian branch, because I spent 2 years in prison before. We slept in this way. So after the revolution, we speak about more than 20 people in the same cell. We speak about very small cell with 2 meter and 3 meter. And these people, they spend a long time in it without any food, without any health care. So it's really tough to dig more with these victims, to get the information from them about the prison. actually we try to care about the trauma or the some like mental issue, but it's really tough. And we try to follow the interview with a special method. We started from the very basic life. I will follow the slide, because we start with the personal information, start with their family, their community, from which kind of city, which kind of religion. It's not something for political issue, but when we speak about the religion or the people and their life and their family, they get relaxing and then start to speak a little bit, go step by step to the moment of arrest, then the food inside the head, etc., the life in prison, and the court if they had or had a court, the release time. It was amazing time for the huge number. I can say for the all, the release time, that it's just 1 or 2 moments, but they remember everything in their life, include the prison time, include their comrade inside the prison, their brother, they leave it inside the prison, and the impact of detention in their life after the prison, the social impact, the family, and the economical way. And you can, when we speak about Syria all the time, any of my friends ask me about the Syria, the first image that came to my head, it's a prison. Even we have the siege, we have this, our diaspora now, all the Syrian around the world, even the Syrian in Syria, they don't have their own home in this time. And all the time when we speak about Syria, we speak about the prison. If you ask me why, because the Syria, it's really a big prison. It's Syria now, any building, any government building, any state building could be a prison. Even the school, even the hospital, any state building could be a prison. So for that, the prison and the Syrian prison is really important to follow it, to study it, to understanding, because I will try to use this word in my life. I have a dream to polishing the Syrian prison, the Syrian Sijan, not prison, because it's really shame to keep silent when this kind of like living being, I mean the prison is a living being now in Syria, the living being still exists and still kill the Syrian all the time, kill the people all the time. When we speak now, some of people in Said Naya or in the detention place, they passed away. When we speak right now, they passed away. They tortured. They have suffering. They go through the suffering to find their life, but they couldn't find their life because we have the Syrian regime still exists till now, and we have this kind of like the headquarters of the Syrian regime. I mean, in this world, the prison. So this is my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Are we going to turn the mics? Yeah. Jabir and Uğur, thank you very much for the presentation. I'd like to begin our discussion by posing 3 questions dealing with the context, the collaboration, your process of collaboration, and the stakes of your project. I'll give each of you an opportunity to weigh in if you'd like. We'll start with context. The consequences of Syrian state repression and the civil war were arguably experienced in a much more immediate way in Europe, particularly in countries like the Netherlands and Germany, than they were here in the United States. I mean, there are members of our community here in Providence who came from Syria, but the scale of the migration and the displacement that we saw was, I think, very different than it was in Europe. Could you contextualize for us being an audience that's based in the US, what the Syrian civil war and the migration associated with it looked like from Amsterdam when you started to work on this project? I mean, you talked a little bit about the impetus behind the project, but I'm thinking if you can kind of flush out the context you were working in for us.
Yeah. Is that for me, for Robert?
Oh, the question is, all of the questions are to both of you. So I don't know if you want to, Jabir can go first, and then
Yeah.
or you can go next. We'll deal with this question, and then I will pose the next question and the subsequent
Okay,
question.
Good. Maybe I can start, and then Jabir can continue. Huh? So, I mean, we met in 2017. And this is 2 years after the large wave of Syrian refugees came to Europe, and there were 800,000 in Germany. There were several tens of thousands in the Netherlands, France, etc. And that had a number of consequences. Number one, because I had this project called the Syrian Oral History Project, in which we interviewed a large number of Syrians about their general experiences in the country before and during the conflict. And I just noticed that, the disproportionate number of people, without me asking, started talking about the prisons. Because they'd been in prison, or that somebody was still in prison, or all of a sudden they felt the need to talk about it. So that was one thing, the outpouring of stories, not just people. The second thing is that, of course, which made research possible. The second thing that happened is that researchers such as Jabir, for example, who, he can explain it himself, who all of a sudden had, of course, opportunities to do this research. There was a freedom and there was relative infrastructure to do this. And third is that collaborations such as these were now possible. Right? Because we met basically in the University of Amsterdam environment and at the Institute for War and Genocide Studies, where I work, and let alone studying like political violence in Syria, that was not possible. But even studying political science or any social sciences and humanities, that was discouraged, and it was very difficult to do so. So I think these three factors they brought us together, and of course we all have our shortcomings. For example, when we met, I started learning Arabic much later, actually in 2012. And it took me years and years and years to reach fluency. But still, I'm not half as fluent as Jabir, and I don't know the jargon of the prison and the kind of insider culture. But I had read mostly on like prisons in Turkey and Iran. So I have certain strengths, and Jabir had certain strengths. And I think when that came together, that produced. Jabir.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I'm one of the reasons to start this project as a Syrian Gulag, not as a researcher, as an ex-prisoner. When you met any Syrian man or woman in the street and ask her about the prison and her or his experience in the prison, immediately he will told you some experience by himself or his brother or his father or his sister or his friend, etc., etc. So the Syrian prison exists in Europe now with the Syrian people because we carry it with us. You can follow the people on the street. We have the center of 41, I think, in Amsterdam, and you can meet a lot of Syrian people there have this trauma because of their experience in the prison, not in the personal, maybe in the family way. Because we speak about a huge number of them forced disappearance in Syria. We speak about around 135,000 men and women. We don't know anything about them now, and maybe all of them, maybe around 70% from them inside the prison. Maybe maybe they pass away. We don't know. So this kind of number, I don't like the number, by the way, but this kind of number is really a huge. We speak about a country like Syria, we speak about 21 million, and we speak about a family like 5 people, such family in Syria. So we speak about 0.001% from the Syrian people have this experience about the forced disappearing or the prison. And a lot of Syrians now live in Europe, Germany, Netherlands, France, and we speak about 3 million in Turkey, 500,000 in Lebanon, Jordan and Egypt, and Iraq. So the Syrian around the world now. So in this way, the Syrian prison, it's like a world issue. It's not a Syrian issue. It's not a Syrian question. It's a world question now. We have this question to handle it, to find the solution for the Syrian prison, to save our community. The international community, not just the Syrian people. Yeah.
Thank you for your response. I think the next question kind of picks up on some of what you were starting to say already, or in terms of the different things that you each brought to the project. But I wanted to speak specifically about collaboration. And I was wondering if you could speak some about your process of collaborating on the project together, and of particular interest are sort of challenges that you had to navigate as you work together. And I'm also interested in the ways that a collaboration on a project of this kind afforded you, how it afforded you the opportunity to do things that would have been impossible had you been working individually on your own on such a project. And I'm also interested and wanted to give you an opportunity to speak some to how you navigated some of the asymmetries that necessarily accompany a collaboration that involves one person, Jabir, if I may, with lived experience of the Syrian prison, or you as a person who was approaching this from a position in a university.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to go first, Jabir?
No, you can. Yeah, please start.
Okay. Well, yes. I mean, these are some of the obvious, let's say, differences in background, of course. And we once used to joke as what would have happened if he was born, let's say, in the Netherlands, and I was born in Syria. And then the biographies would have been most probably reversed, but the rest would have been roughly the same. And I think that one of the things we always spoke about is that how does imprisonment, like arrest, imprisonment, detention, torture, disrupt a person's life? Mm-hmm. And because a lot of these people who were detained were young, right, one of the major disruptions actually is to their education. So somebody, for example, was finished a BA and then started an MA, then got arrested. Then is in prison for 5 years, 6 years. And when he gets out, can't finish his degree, nobody will hire him for a job, has a stigma. So also, how's a person like that supposed to do the research? And I think as so many Syrians went abroad, and we're not the only ones working on the prison system. There's a number of people who have actually written theses, for example, doctoral theses, MA theses, students who are interested specifically in the topic. I think what we did was basically being honest about our own shortcomings, right? So I was a little stronger in, let's say, historiography of the Middle East. Jabir obviously on the profound understanding of Syrian society, because yes, it's experiential, but experience at the same time is expertise, right? So, we once joked that actually his research on the prison system started the first day that he was in the branch, because that's when you are forced to understand it for survival, right? So, and I never had that experience. I have one experience with the Syrian Mukhabarat, and that was in 2006 when I visited a friend. And at the Damascus bus station, they pulled me in some kind of weird room. 3 guys with black clothes and grim, glowering, but always white socks. They kind of, where are you going? And so, who do you know in this country? Write a list. I find that extremely intimidating already. And when I read, or when we wrote this, I thought, well, these people went through, and they were at the whims of the power and the violence of these type of men. I found it absolutely terrifying. So. We had our shortcomings. I want to thank Jabir for always speaking Arabic to me. Never anything else. That really helped me. If anybody who really developed my Arabic, it's Jabir. And then he had his shortcomings, and we kind of complemented each other in a fairly kind of open-minded way, I think.
Mm-hmm. Jabir, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, actually, from my side, I will just notice something. I have been arrested when I was 20 years old, and I started to use myself as a recorder and listen for the story of the older and oldest prisoner. One of them, he's still in the prison till now. I born on the 4th of December, and he arrested in the 1st of 81, and I am born at the end of this year, and he still exists in the prison. Ragid al-Tatari, after 41 years imprisonment inside the Syrian prison, during this long time, he still has this kind of patience to do something really important, speak with the others and try to help them to find a way inside the prison. So when I met Uğur in the end of 2017, we have this real question: what about if we have? Why we don't have a book about the Syrian prison to compare with the other? So we start to follow the possibility how we can build this kind of project, and then when we start to create our plan, then we have our place without any thinking, because we work as a professor in the university and have this experience, academic experience, that helped me a lot to build the questionnaire and how the method to follow my way to interview the victims and when and where, and he have this kind of this. I sorry to say that this is a European privilege to have this kind of opportunity to publish a book. So actually we work like a brother, if I can say that, and in this way we are a family, because the old prisoner in Syria work with their others as a family. So when we work about the prison, we use the family method, work as a family. And even in the family, we have problems. We had like a tough discussion about some issues, but it's okay. This is the work. This is the research time. This is when you have some story. It's really important, like the chemical issue up in Tadmor, and we decided finally we don't use it. It's something not easy to get the discussion or decision in this kind of stories, on this kind of events, but we need something very solid, very real to put it on the table and tell the people about the Syrian prison with clean word.
Thank you. I'll pose one final question, and then we'll open the floor to questions or comments from the audience that's gathered with us today in Providence. My final question is about stakes. Some people here at Brown might laugh because this is my stock question. I always ask a question about the stakes. I like to zoom out a little bit. And I think, one response that some readers to this book might have is that it's too empirical, and that it's very documentary, and it doesn't do enough to analyze or theorize the carceral system and associated state power that you chronicle. But I think we're living in a time when empiricism is of incredible importance. And being able to document reality in different kind of ways is incredibly important intellectual work. And so I wanted to give you the opportunity to reflect on the stakes and the importance of assembling the kind of documentary and empirical record you did, and what it means to put a narrative history of the Syrian prison system into the world. And here, where you mentioned the case of the Syrian official who was tried and sentenced in Germany last year, but wondering maybe how this, how you might connect the work that you did in this book to some of these questions of justice and accountability in Europe.
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay, so I think, a couple of things here. Yes, the book is fairly empirical, and that is because it is explicitly meant to be a general audience book. And so a 40-page introduction about carceral theories, with high levels of abstraction, talking about how torture really writes violence on the body, politics of the Syrian, that's all fantastic. That can be done and has to be done. But I think that the gap in the literature was actually mostly empirical. Like, we don't know how many prisons there are. We don't know who runs these prisons, which intelligence agency is responsible for which branch and why. Theory is good, but it has to be have empirical feet, yeah. so to say. So that's one thing. The other thing is, of course, because it's a general audience book, Jabir is working now on the Arabic edition of the book, right? So it's not enough to extract data from the Syrians and then write it up and come to Brown University, but also has to be explicitly also in Arabic, and it has to be read by Syrians and broadly in the Arabic language. And for that, we discussed that quite a bit, and we came to the consensus that what was necessary actually was a solid overview, a solid empirical recreation, which with of course, analyses of and explanations. And also that's what the opportunity was, actually. The opportunity was now actually we have a chance. And one of the slides I think Jabir wanted to show was of leaked documents. So a number of intelligence agents either leaked files or they were bought by certain activists, or for example, one of the branches that was lost to the rebels, then activists went into the archive and extracted the entire Mukhabarat archive. That's something that was unprecedented, has never happened in Syrian history, that we get into the minds of the perpetrators of the regime. So, and all of those things, I think, had priority.
Yeah, that's true. It's a documentary book or empirical book. That's right. But the Gulag is the first step in this long way to understand the Syrian prison, and to have the full image how it's work and who create this kind of monster and still function till now, and why still function. Because when we speak about the prison, we speak not just about the building, because I mentioned before, any building in Syria could be a prison. The school, any building, I'm really sure any building. So when we speak about the security prison, we speak about the camping for the Shabibat al-Ba'ath. It's like a small organization that related to the al-Ba'ath party. We speak about like a school in Hama or in Aleppo. They use it to be a prison. So how we don't have like this civil resistance against the prison during this long time? We speak about 50 years ago. It started from 70 till 2020 in the Syrian Gulag. But this empirical information or this empirical evidence include the document that mentioned by Uğur, that help us a lot to create a special theory about the Syrian prison. And by myself, it's a personal opinion, I don't like the comparing issue between the prison through the country, for example, Egyptian or like a Syrian or Turkish. All the carceral issue, it's a tough one. Any prison, it's really difficult to be in it. But the Syrian prison all the time have this first point, and then in the head of the hierarchy. If we try to build the prison in the hierarchy, and the Syrian prison, really it's horrible. Really it's horrible, because we speak about not the torture to get the information from the prisoner. They torture the prisoner just to pass away, just to kill them under the torture. And when you try to kill anyone under the torture, you need a time and you need a power. You need maybe 2 or 3 guards torture someone for during 5, maybe 7 hours to pass away. It's really horrific issue to think about it. How these people came to be like a monster in this prison. So it's really important to get the empirical information and evidence to create and understand the prison if we want to close it, if we want to polish this institution.
Thank you. We will open the floor now to comments. Sorry, I'm dealing with some allergies. Comments and questions from the floor. Nadia, please.
Yeah, thank you both. I have a couple of quick questions and a comment. So I'm very conscious that we have to be careful not to sort of reproduce this idea of a culture of violence when it comes to the Middle East in general and Syria in particular. However, I can't help wondering, I mean, your focus is on the Syrian state, the Ba'ath regime. But as far as I know, of course, large parts of Syria or some parts of Syria, at least at some point, were under the control of different militias, different factions, different groups in opposition to the state. And again, my limited knowledge sort of points me in the direction that there was lots of horrible incarceration and torture happening, in these areas as well. So I was wondering if you can speak a little bit about that and, the way, how do you explain that even though people are in opposition to this horrendous regime, they're actually reproducing some of the practices of control? Mm-hmm. And my second question is, so I'm a gender studies scholar, and I'm wondering, I looked at the book and I saw also stories of female prisoners, but I'm wondering, how did you go about interviewing female prisoners, given that some of the stories, especially when it comes to gender-based violence, would be quite sensitive? And then I guess one comment, I think I felt a little bit uncomfortable with the way you make a very strong binary between prison, like a normal prison, which is sort of the place where criminals go and then they're released into the society. I think you can say that in the Netherlands, but we're in the United States after all. And I think in the United States, I wouldn't make that strong distinction between prison being this good place for dealing with criminals and then, the Syrian where they're suffering. I think the States is actually an example of also a society that is exerting control through incarceration. So that's my comment.
Yeah, very good. Okay, this is great actually, because we talked about all of these things for days and days with Jabir during all of our conversations. We are acutely aware of the latter problem, of course. In fact, even of the export of the American carceral system to, let's say, Iraq and Afghanistan. Afghanistan is something I'm working on right now, and there you see actually American practices actually being rule by law instead of rule of law, and rule by governance by imprisonment. And so that's Salwa Ismail's argument actually, which is more broadly, maybe not in a number of like Northwest European societies, but of course it differs. Maybe on the rebels, let's say so Free Syrian Army, then the Islamist rebels, and then there's Nusra, even more, let's say, radical, and then there's ISIS. I think one thing that we correct me if I'm wrong, Jabir, is that we agreed on is actually that a lot of the imprisonment practices of, for example, POWs, they mimic actually the style, the torture methods, and the impact of the regime. And one of the things, and that doesn't, of course, there's no moral conclusions to that, but it does mean that why does that happen? I think that's an interesting fact in itself. Not to mention in some territories that the regime lost, right? The prisons were still there. The intelligence prisons were still there. When the rebels took them over, they simply took over the same prison and they started putting other people in there and using sometimes even some of these elaborate torture methods. So that's definitely the case, but that does say something about political culture. I don't know what, but it has to be figured out, because we didn't look too much at that, because still at any point 80% of the Syrian population was under Assad's rule, because all the big cities were there. But maybe Jabir wants to talk about that. And also the question on gender, I think Jabir can answer that really, really well, because I came in thinking we're two cisgendered men with beards. No Syrian women are going to talk to us. But actually, Jabir convinced me that it was exactly the opposite. Right?
Yeah. Actually, I will start with the interview with the woman. I was surprising with this kind of relation that created between me as a researcher and the woman, the prisoner from woman prisoner, and they really have this kind of courage to share their story, to share their experience inside the prison, with the whole details and the time and the torture method, everything, and that shook me and that put me in some place not comfortable in the first. But when I asked them why, They said because we can't share this kind of information, this kind of story with our family because of the stigma. So we need this story to go in the public, to go out and let the society, the Syrian or the foreign people know more about the Syrian prison, know more about our struggling inside the prison. So in this case, maybe our family, they get respect us more than before. It's really tough for me as a Syrian man to say that. It's really tough and to say that the Syrian society don't respect the ex-prisoner, the ex-prisoner from the female ex-prisoner. I don't know. It's not something like I don't like to say this we have a negative culture or positive culture. I am with your opinion and with your word that you use it, Nadia. But you know, when we speak about the violence and in Syria, we speak about a system that create the violence as a behavior, as a second behavior for the Syrian people for a very long time. We speak about 50 years, but the Assad regime all the time try to educate the Syrian with the violence. Even in the school, we have violence in the school. We have violence in the street. Any traffic policeman that he can torture anyone in the street. All this society under pressure all the time. So when the revolution started, in 76, or for example, or after the 2011, all the Syrians try to defend against each other, and they use the prison as a people support the Assad regime. They use the prison as a place to expert their method, their torture method on the Syrian body, on the Syrian people. So for that, when we speak about the other groups, for example, the opposite group, the military groups in Idlib or any place, I'm not going to surprise you when I said in 2008, we have a trouble in Saydnaya prison, for example. And the arrested prisoner, they thought they work with the Syrian regime, they work with the intelligence. They tortured them with a horrible way inside Saydnaya prison. The human, it's really, I don't know, it's really amazing. For me, after the Syrian Gulag, I changed my mind about our behavior, our self as a human people, because it's really tough to think about someone he spent time with me all the time and said Naya, and then when the trouble started, he think I'm work with the intelligence, and he tortured me for a long time with a horrible way, and used the same method that the Syrian regime used it. And by the way, all the military group in Syria, they used the Syrian regime method for torture. So for that, I think when we speak about the institution memory, it's not just for the Syrian regime. It's going to be for the Syrian society and the Syrian opposite groups.
Other questions?
Hi, I'm Jody Rich, and faculty here and work as a physician in the correctional system here. And I kind of wonder, you know, your methodology of just talking to the people that have come out. I'm just trying to think through what would the U.S. system look like if you did the same thing here. Because, of course, we don't torture, except we do torture. We put people in solitary confinement, and there are, you know, there's very little oversight, official oversight, nothing like in Europe. We don't have ombudsman. We don't have surprise visits. We really don't know what's going on in there. So, and I'm not aware of anybody who's really systematically interviewed people coming out to say, okay, what actually happened? So I'm just wondering, I mean, how many people did you interview, and how many would it take to replicate this study in the U.S. system, for example?
A lot, I think a lot. I mean, because the U.S. has the perspective, we looked at the formal statistics of imprisonment, and there's a yearbook that comes out, as you know, and then of course we extrapolated to see, okay, but there's no figures for North Korea, but it doesn't mean people are not in prison. So if we look at it from that perspective, the US has the highest number of imprisonment in absolute numbers, and also even almost in relative numbers, like per 1,000 inhabitants, for example. But if we look at, and in the beginning of the introduction, we have some statistics on that. If we assume that about, let's say, 250, 300,000 people have been in prison in Syria at some point in the conflict, that is by far the highest per 1,000 inhabitants ever. So Jabir interviewed about 100 people, and there are a number also of informal conversations. There are also a number of interviews that failed, for example. We knew that somebody was a really interesting eyewitness because we heard through the grapevine that that person just came out of that particular branch. We have to talk to him. And he refused. For example, that has also happened, unfortunately, a number of times. I've interviewed about 50 people, half of which were in prison, the other half were tangential, like the parents were in prison, so they grew up without a father, and therefore didn't make any children, for example. So it had the transgenerational impact also. I've looked at that quite a bit. Semi-structured interviews, mostly in Arabic, and in some cases people didn't want to speak Arabic, or they were too fluent in another language already by then. So if you would like to replicate this, there is a book, maybe more even than one, called Britain's Gulag, which is on the decolonization war in Kenya and the imprisonment system there. And then there are also books, maybe more than one, American Gulag, which argue that the detention system in the US, the imprisonment system, is a form of governance and is racialized, etc. There's a lot of very good studies on that. So, and this has to do with the term Gulag, why we use the term. It's not for populist reasons, like, for a general audience book, let's throw out something sensationalist. No, we actually had like profound conversations with actual experts of the Soviet Gulag, one of whom is a close colleague of mine. And Jabir and I we were in her office, and she had a map called the Map of the Gulag on her wall. And we looked at it, and we had profound discussions with her about, we want to use the term because for a number of reasons, not only for quantity, the number of prisons and the scale, but also for the disproportionate impact that the Soviet Gulag and the Syrian Gulag makes on the society. Even everybody who's not imprisoned thinks every day, I don't want to be there. It structures their behavior, right? So don't put if somebody posts something on Facebook against Assad, don't put a like there, because the intelligence is going to see it and they'll arrest you. Don't crack any jokes. You heard a fantastic joke about Assad. Don't tell anyone. There's somebody, for example, that we interviewed who, this was an apartment in Damascus, and then there was, somebody had, as you do, a big photo, of course, framed of Hafiz Assad on the wall. And at some point, upstairs neighbors, they had water leakage. And the water leaked on the painting. There was no damage. But then when somebody came into the house, like a civil servant, and saw that, reported the family for disrespecting the president, for not clearing that up, or they thought it was intentional, and the entire family was arrested. And the father was in jail for a few years for that. So the disproportionate impact on the society, and I think that can be an interesting comparison.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I just have one story about someone. You will find this story in the Gulag, someone who spent 17 years in Tadmor just for a dream. He saw a dream, and some Prophet Muhammad told him in the dream that Hafiz Assad he will die in some way. I don't know the whole details, and he had a real tough conversation with the head of the court and the military court in the prison. And the head of this court, he told him, the Prophet told you that Hafiz Assad would pass away. I said, no. He said, yes, no, yes. And he said, it's my dream. Actually, it's my dream. And he told him, no, it's okay, fine. We have justice here in this country, and you will get your justice. And the justice is 17 years in Tadmor, the military prison. So this is Syria, actually. When we speak about the prison in Syria, when we speak about the Sijin, this is Syria. This is the Sijin of Syria. So for that, this is important to go deeper, dig more in the Syrian prison, the Syrian Sijin, So when I'm continue to interview the people, and when we speak about the interview, we don't speak about like short term. We don't speak about 1 hour, 2 hour. I spend 2 or 3 weeks with someone speak about his story in the prison. Very, very long story, and we go with the details. So for that, I'm continue to write my next book with my co-author, if I can say that, and my Macmanus, about the Syrian prison heritage, how the Syrian people, not just the Syrian, because in the Syrian prison we have the Iraqian, Palestinian, Lebanese, and the Syrian, and Turkish, by the way, and Jordani. So we have a lot of nationality. It's like a pan-Arab in the prison, and all these people try to find a way to find their life inside the prison, to recreate their life inside the prison, and create their memory, because the human being, it's a memory. Just we are just our memory. We remember what we are and live what we remember about us. So these people try to find a new memory, a good memory in the prison. If you ask me about my time in Sayyid Naya, I will tell you my time in Sayyid Naya, it was the perfect time in my life, because it's changed my life. I was studying mechanic engineering in Syria, and when I arrested in that time, I changed my career to be a journalist. I'm working journalist in Syria till I get Syria in 2012 to Lebanon. Till now, I have this experience to write in Arabic, to love this language. I have traveled with all languages in the world, not just with English, as you see, but even with the Arabic at that time. But someone, his name Ahmad Hamdul Mahmoud, he passed away in Aleppo prison. He told me about the very beautiful place inside the Arabic language, and try to help me to find my relation with this language. And this is my relation with Sayyid Naya. This is my relation with the Syrian prison. But if I said this kind of speech with the Syrian people now about the prison, they said no, the prison is very terrible way. Yeah, I tortured in Palestinian branch. I tortured in 248 in the interrogation branch, military intelligence service. I spent very terrible time in Sayyid Naya when my friend go to execute in Sayyid Naya. Yeah, but when I try to remember that time, I just choose to remember the positive issue, because I wanted to continue my life. And this is what you can find it with the ex-prisoner from Syria, the Syrian ex-prisoner. And all the time they try to tell you the story with a right way, and with very respect their own memory to put it with you. So for that, I have this responsibility to continue this way to understand the prison, not just for myself, but for the Syrian prisoner.
We have about 5 minutes left. Are there any other questions from the audience? If not, I'll pose a couple of my own questions. Yeah. Just wait for that. If you could just wait for the microphone.
Sure.
Thank you.
This is for Jabbar. You spoke at a couple of different points in time about a dream of abolishing the Gulag system in Syria, of a solution to the Gulag system in Syria. What does that look like? Obviously, and I know that's an impossible question, but obviously this book in itself is a worthwhile step in that direction just by documenting what exists. But I wondered if you had any thoughts about that, what that means to you.
Actually, it's a difficult question for me, because I'm still in my process to understand the Syrian Gulag. It's shame to say I'm not understand the Syrian Gulag when I did this kind of book with Uğur. But yeah, we don't have the full image. We don't have yet the full image about the Syrian Gulag. And I think our study about in the Syrian prison help us to find a way to find the material that we can use it to polishing the Syrian prison. But what that mean for me, if we can do it, that mean I can return to Syria in this case. I can go back to my home and bury my father, because my father is almost 75 years old, and I will say for him goodbye by phone. So if we don't have the Syrian Gulag in Syria, I can go back to my home and spend my time with my father, with my family, and it's not just my situation. It's actually around 5 million Syrian outside of Syria. When we don't have the Syrian Gulag, we don't have the Syrian regime, so all the Syrian outside, they go back there to their home and restart their life in Syria. So this is what meaning if we can polishing the Syrian Gulag, because if you go with the news now and take some news about Syria, you will find like a normalization with the Syrian regime, with Assad, and go to the Arabic groups, etc., etc. That's right, yeah, the Assad is victory now. But they use the prison against the Syrian all the time. And we have this silent massacre inside the prison, still exists, still functional till now. And all the Syrian people now in Syria and dangerous to arrest and pass away inside the prison. Even any Syrian man or woman or family, children, any Syrian, go and return to Syria, go back to Syria, maybe will be arrested and pass away inside the prison. So for that, it's the first step. If we try to have some solution for the Syrian people, take out the Syrian Gulag, and then when we turn off the Syrian Gulag, the whole regime will turn off, because the Syrian Gulag is the heart of the Syrian regime.
I think that's a very good note to end our event on, seeing as we're almost at time, 1:15. Please join me in thanking Uğur and Jabir for joining us. I'd like to thank the audience as well for sharing your time and attention with us this afternoon. Thank you.